Hiya, family. My name is Donna. Some of you may know me as the lady who says, "Young man." Well, this isn't scripture reading, but this is for those whom think that they're unable to fast because, they think that it's actually bad for us. Well, this book is called The Science and Fine Art of Fasting by Herbert M Shelton. It was originally written in 1934, and he's snitching, family. He updated it, I believe, in 1949, but it tells you why we really should be fasting. We shouldn't be afraid of it. Our bodies actually heal. And actually, that is the secret place of the Most High when we do fast. That's the secret place. So, the Most High, He takes care of our temple. Our temples, they're for Yahuwah. And so this is part 13 of The Science and Fine Art of Fasting by Herbert M Shelton. Like I said, it was originally written in 1934, updated in 1949, and this is going to be gain and loss of weight during fasting. So here we go, family. I love you guys. Sorry, it takes... No, I didn't. Yes, I did. Hold on, I got to tighten it up, family. I am not tech savvy, family, as you guys probably already know. Here we go. Sorry, family. Okay. So this is chapter 17, gain and loss of weight during fasting. And I have to go up a little bit more. Yep. I'm sorry it's so hard to read. This is also going to be downloaded onto YouTube. And YouTube, they have the closed captioning. So that's a really good thing about YouTube. So if you're not already following me on YouTube, I'm reading this. Plus, I'm also reading all the scripture readings. Okay, here we go, family. Although we usually say that a faster loses about a pound a day, the loss of weight varies greatly depending on a number of circumstances. Fat subjects lose more rapidly than lean ones. The more physically active one is, the more rapidly one loses weight. The longer the fast progresses, the less rapid is the loss of weight. Losses of 5 or 6 pounds a day for the first 2 or 3 days are often recorded. But these losses are not losses of flesh. Most of this apparent loss is due to the emptying of the alimentary canal of several pounds of food and feces, which is not replaced by more food. George S. Keith, MD, LLD, FRCPE, who successfully employed fasting in his health care of the sick for many years, says in his plea for a simple life, a healthy man, when he takes no food, loses in weight at first about a pound a day, which is gradually lessened to half a pound if the abstinence is prolonged. In the best thing in the world, Mr. Shaw, recording the developments in his own fast, which he carefully watched, says the loss of flesh for many days has been less and less. As compared with the earliest days of the fast, the loss of weight grows less and less daily. It is the history of all fasts that weight is lost more rapidly during the first few days than during the subsequent period. In one fast of 30 days conducted by myself, the loss during the last 5 days was 1/4 of a pound a day. The patient was moderately active from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. During Mr. Johnston's 30 days fast, he lost from 1/2 a pound to 2 pounds a day. On the 13th day of the fast, his loss was 1/2 a pound. On the 22nd and 23rd days, he weighed the same, apparently losing nothing. This, however, was due to profuse water drinking. I have seen cases gain weight for 2 and 3 days at a time from drinking so much water at the beginning of his 30 days fast. Mr. Johnston weighed 154.5 pounds. At its completion, his weight was 131.5 pounds. His total loss being 23 pounds. During the 20 days of walking from Chicago without food, he lost 37.5 pounds, more than in the previous fast of 30 days. It goes without saying that the physically active faster loses more rapidly than the faster who rests most or all of the time. During the first few days of his fast, Sinclair lost 15 pounds, an indication of the extremely poor state of his tissues. During the next 8 days, he lost only 2 pounds, a very unusual thing for this stage of fasting. Levinson lost 29 pounds. During his 31 days fast in the Carnegie Institute. Major Gottschall says, for the first 8 days of my fast, I lost 25 pounds. This very unusual loss indicates that his tissues were in very poor condition. The weight lost by fat patients in the early days of a fast is astounding. I have seen losses of 5 and 6 pounds a day for the first few days. A woman who fasted in the health school in January and February of 1950 lost 25 pounds in the first 2 weeks. As before indicated, rapid loss of weight in a fast indicates a poor condition of the tissues. It has been repeatedly noticed that fat individuals who are soft and flabby lose more rapidly than those whose fat is firm and solid. As the fast progresses, the rate of loss decreases in fat patients. Skinny patients commonly lose slowly from the beginning, but one whose tissues are in very poor condition may lose very rapidly at the onset. Mr. Carrington tabulated and published the losses of weight sustained in 10 selected patients. In 253 days of fasting, these lost 248 pounds, or approximately a pound a day. Such figures supply us with a fairly accurate index to the amount of actual nutritive substance in the average person required each day. By actual nutritive material is meant water-free and waste-free food. The greater part of our foods, as we consume them, is water and indigestible, fiber or bulk. About a pound a day of actual nutritive substance is sufficient to maintain a healthful balance between income and outgo of food. I present Carrington's table of weight losses from his Vitality, Fasting, and Nutrition. And here are the 10 patients' names, the weight at the beginning and the weight at the end, the number of days, and the loss of weight. The first one is George Davis. He was 228 pounds. He went down to 174 for 50 days. He lost 54 pounds. Number 2 is Mrs. Matthews. 150 she started, ended at 123, did it for 22 days and lost 27 pounds and so forth. So, okay. And then at the bottom of that, it says, it will be noted by a careful study of this chart that the rates of loss varied much in these 10 cases. Several factors account for this. For patients, fat patients lose much faster than do thin ones. Nervous and emotional patients lose more rapidly than calm and poised individuals. Patients that are relaxed and resting lose less weight than those that are tense or active. There's also a correlation between the condition of the patient's tissue and his loss of weight. Fat individuals who are soft and flabby fall away very rapidly. Those fat individuals who are hard and firm lose much slower. There is the added fact that much water drinking tends to keep the weight up by waterlogging the tissues without preventing the usual loss of solid substance. It is also true that the most rapid losses occur in the earliest part of the fast, so that on the whole, short fasts show greater average daily losses than do long fasts. Losses are not as great in second, third, or fourth fast as in the first. On the basis of this table and other data which he considered, Mr. Carrington concluded that the average loss of weight by fasting patients amounts, ceteris paribus, to 1 pound per diem. He noted that in some cases there are great variations from this loss and pointed out that the loss is greater at the beginning than at the end of the fast. He says a patient loses approximately 1 1/2 pounds per diem at the very beginning of every fast for every 1/2 pound, which is lost towards its close. As these observations were all made on sick individuals, Mr. Carrington asks the question, how much should the normal man lose? He says more than 1 pound a day is obviously too much, denoting obesity, while less than 1/2 pound is too little, denoting emaciation. He says that we cannot accept the average loss of weight of 1 pound a day as the normal loss for the reason that all patients who find it necessary to fast absolutely are already in a grossly abnormal condition, and their loss of weight must consequently be considered abnormal also. He says that 1 pound a day must represent the loss of a diseased body and is by no means a normal loss. Reversing his position that if the normal man fasts, he starves, he takes the position that a loss of 1 pound a day for a normal man is too great. He mentions a loss of 15 pounds in a week of fasting by Mr. McFadden, a loss of nothing at all during a fast of 4 days by Miss Louise Copps of New York, May 1904. And the gain of 3/4 of a pound by Mr. J. Estepper in a week of fasting. These are exceptional cases and provide no basis for a calculation of the weight a normal person should lose during a fast. From a consideration of various data, however, he reached the conclusion that the fasting normal man should lose an average of 12 ounces a day. This, he thinks, represents the actual nutritive needs of the body daily in order to preserve its weight and to replace worn-out tissue. Rabigliotti arrived at the same conclusion from different data. The reader will understand that food, that is the raw material, is not all nutriment. This does not mean 12 ounces of food, but 12 ounces of nutritive material that the digestive system may extract from the food. Discussing losses of weight during a short fast, Benedict says losses of body weight in experiments of a few days' duration are wholly without significance. With regard to the total cumulative loss as the experiment progresses, it appears that in long experiments of Suchi, the loss bears in general a direct ratio to the length of the experiment. He recites a fast conducted by Nicholson using a prisoner for the experiment, in which there was an average daily loss of 1.4 pounds, the greatest loss appearing during the first part of the experiment. Observations show that women lose slightly more than men do when fasting. This is thought to be due to the fact that women usually carry more fatty tissue than men. The rate of metabolism in women is lower than in men, and we should expect men to lose more rapidly. But it is a well-established fact that the fatter the individual, the greater the comparative loss of weight. This is added confirmation of Carrington's conclusion that healthy subjects lose at a slower rate than the sick. What are lost pounds to those who have recovered from their miseries, so that they may eat in comfort and with pleasure, after they have been restored to good health by a period of physical, mental, and physiological rest? They may regain the lost pounds. There is this difference, however: after the fast, the patient may put on healthy flesh. McLeod's Physiology in Modern Medicine says that all of the fat does not disappear from the tissues during starvation. This has led to the concept that a certain amount of fat in a tissue is an essential part of that tissue, while the remainder is present as storage material. The essential portion is constant in amount, while the storage fat varies with the amount presenting in the diet and with the metabolic activity of the tissues. It is the lowering of the metabolic rate that follows the first part of the fast that accounts for the slowing up of the rate of loss. It is said that a man may lose 40% of his normal weight before his life is endangered. We know, however, that many fasting patients lose much more than this without danger or harm. Indeed, Dr. Dewey insists that when death occurs before the skeleton condition is reached, it is always due to the old age or some other form of disease or injury, and not to starvation. Dr. Hazard and Mr. Carrington hold the same view, and as will be shown later, there are facts which support this view. Joseph found that the ultimate proportional losses in different animals experimented on were almost exactly the same, death occurring when the body had lost 2/5, 40% of its original weight. Different parts of the body lose weight in different proportions. The chief losses are sustained by the adipose tissues, the muscle and glands. Young organisms are said to die when they have lost 20% of their original weight. It makes a great difference when one commences to figure the 40% loss that results in death. It must be computed from normal weight, not original weight. The fast of J. Austin Shaw of New York, recorded by Dr. Dewey, was of 45 days duration, during which period he lost but 26¾ pounds at the beginning of the fast. He weighed 199¾ pounds at the end, 173 pounds, being still overweight. Mr. Profiter, New York, fasted 52 days, losing 43 pounds from 135½ at the start to 92½ at the end. 40% of his original weight would reduce him to 81.3, or allow him to lose 11.2 pounds more, which would have taken 3 more. Three more weeks at the rate he was losing. Young children have, in more than one case, lost more than 20% of their weight before death occurred. See the 2 cases recorded by Dewey. Discussing a 4-pound gain during an 8-day fast by a Mrs. Martinson of Stapleton, Staten Island, and a case reported by Dr. Rabagliati of a gain of 1½ pounds in 3 weeks by a patient on less than 8 ounces of food a day, about 90% of which was water. Carrington says the explanation is, in all probability, this: in all such cases, great density of tissue is present. It is obstipated, and it is called, and when such a person fasts, he or she oxidizes off a part of this too solid tissue and fills in the interstices with water, which the patient is at liberty to drink during the fast. This is, at least, the explanation which I have been driven to adopt. None other seemingly covered the facts. J.H. Washburn of California was reported to have fasted 43 days in 1870 without losing an ounce of flesh. This I do not believe. One of the athletes who fasted 7 days at Madison Square Garden in February 1904 actually gained 3 pounds during the 7 days. The 8 athletes were watched during the entire time by paid guards. Dr. Tanner took no water during the first 16 days of his fast. Tissues became dehydrated and lost weight rapidly. After the 16th day, he drank considerable amounts of water. Tissues rehydrated and gained 4½ pounds during the next 4 days, after which he again commenced to lose weight. Carrington records that Miss Louise Copps of New York lost nothing at all during a 4-day fast in May of 1904, and in the case of Mr. J. Esteper, Jr., a week's fast resulted in an actual gain of 3/4 pound. The weight of Mr. Esteper was very accurately ascertained, and it is asserted that there was no possible source of error through which a mistake could have been made. The faster was one of the competitors in the 7 days fasting athletic contest held in Madison Square Garden during the last week in December 1903. Sorry, family. Measurements and weights were taken with the greater care. The contestants being under the strictest surveillance during the whole period and were frequently observed and examined by physicians in New York City. Mr. McFadden, discussing the case in Physical Culture, March 1904, attributed the gain in weight to the retention within his body of a large part of the distilled water which Mr. Esteper took in large quantities. No danger from loss of weight. There is much fear on the part of many that fasting may result in tuberculosis. They have the idea that to get thin is to lay oneself liable to this disease. This fear is unfounded and is based on a false view. The thinness in tuberculosis is not the cause of the trouble, but the result of its cause. Loss of weight seems to be essential to recovery from acute disease, and nature makes certain that the acute sufferer loses weight no matter how much food is taken. Indeed, a typhoid fever patient will lose weight and strength more rapidly if fed in the usual manner than if fasting, due to the fact that the fasting patient recovers more quickly and even better during the most prolonged fast than when fed the accustomed amount of good nourishing food. Such a patient will lose less weight if he fasts than if he is fed. The loss of weight during a fast does not represent a loss of vital tissue, but of surplus nutriment, waste, fat, etc. It is just so many pounds of disease that one loses. The muscles, for example, decrease in size, but this is due to decrease in the amount of fat in them and to a decrease in the size of their cells. There is no actual lessening of the number of muscle cells during the ordinary fast. Tuberculosis quite often develops in the plethoric and well-fed. Professor Margulis rightly declares, as a social phenomenon, malnutrition is not simply a matter of either insufficient or improper nourishment. It is the sinister combination of blighting influences of poverty, overcrowding, and underclothing, unhealthy and unhygienic environment. Here is the fertile soil on which tuberculosis reaps its ghastly harvest. The weight lost during a fast is rapidly regained if it is desirable to do so. There is not the slightest danger from loss of weight. And I'm going to do this next chapter too, family. And chapter 18, fasting does not induce deficiency disease. A remarkably significant fact, which I pointed out some years ago, is that those extreme conditions of malnutrition or deficiency diseases, which laboratory men dwell upon, never develop during the most prolonged fast and are not met with during a prolonged fruit or green vegetable diet. They developed quickly enough on a pure carbohydrate or on a pure protein diet. Mineral depletion is the probable explanation of such conditions. In experiments with animals fed on mineral-free diets, it was found that they became weak, dull, listless, had fits, and died. They reached a point where they refused to eat. Forced feeding was resorted to. It was found that the animals that were forced to eat the mineral-free diet after their instincts had put put out a stop sign died quicker than animals not fed at all. In experiments of this nature, it was found that the nervous system suffered most. A dog so fed showed sudden fits of madness, became weak and uncertain of his movements, trembled and showed signs of nervousness, and grew weaker and weaker until he could hardly crawl. Years ago, Dr. Foster's experiments proved that pigeons and dogs developed symptoms of auto-intoxication and die sooner when fed on foods artificially deprived of their minerals than when given no food at all. Dogs fed on demineralized food died in 26 to 30 days, whereas dogs completely deprived of all foods lived for 40 to 60 days. One will starve to death with just as much certainty and much more speedily if one attempts to live upon foods containing only one or two elements of nutrition. Isn't that something, family? I want to read that again. One will starve to death with just as much certainty and much more speedily if one attempts to live upon foods containing only one or two elements of nutrition, as if one were totally abstaining from food. A diet of white flour and water, or white sugar and water, will result in death much sooner than a diet of water only. If no food is eaten, the body feeds upon its own food reserves, but it has no provision for meeting the exigencies created by prolonged subsistence on one-sided diets. If no food is taken, the body feeds upon its stored reserves and its less vital tissues. If necessary, until the skeleton conditions is reached, it is able to maintain a balance between its elements and will not develop beyond emaciation. Any of the deficiency diseases, indeed, judicious fasting is distinctly beneficial in such diseases. But nature has made no adequate provision for properly nourishing a body that is fed indefinitely upon half foods. The body does not contain within itself the elements needed to compensate for the deficiency created by denatured foods. Indeed, as pointed out elsewhere, one may starve to death much quicker on some diets than one will if totally abstaining from food. One will die quicker on a diet of white bread than from fasting, and the more bread one consumes, the more severe will be one's suffering, and the sooner will one die. Such foods draw so heavily on certain of the body's reserve elements that these are soon exhausted and body chemistry badly unbalanced. In nutrition and undernutrition, we have a failure to balance the physiological expenditures of the organism. The diet is either inadequate as a whole or else is lacking in some essential components. This results in malnutrition. In this condition, there is an unbalanced demand upon the stored reserves of the body caused by the presence of most of the body's needs in the food eaten. With the deficiency of some of its needs, there is, as a consequence, a basic difference between the processes of metabolism under the two sets of conditions. The contrary phenomena occur when the body is fasting. the body easily controls the use and loss of its reserves, using some of them comparatively rapidly while conserving, hoarding, and redistributing others. In this manner, chemical balance is maintained and no deficiency disease is produced and no organ is crippled. In total fasting, the body's reserves are drawn upon in a balanced manner, or else those elements that are most abundant are used more rapidly, so that balance is preserved or is restored as a consequence. Professor Margulis says that our observation that the chronically underfed dog became debilitated in a measure not commonly noted in animals which undergo a straight fast is also borne out of the more extensive study of this matter by Benedict, Miles, Roth, and Smith. This bears out my contention that fasting does not produce the same deplorable results in the body that underfeeding or unbalanced feeding does. Fasting tends to maintain and even to restore chemical balance, whereas the unbalanced or inadequate diet tends to unbalance the body's chemistry. Scurvy, typhus, and spotted fever, influenza, and diarrhea are reported to develop in famine districts. Following in the wake of the famine and persisting long afterwards, rickets, diarrhea, various skin eruptions, and purulent inflammation of the eyes are found in nearly all children. The famine of 1848 in Ireland left a large number of blind women and men behind. The number of blind increased from 13,812 in 1848 to 45,947 in 1851. It is such experiences as these that have served to prejudice thousands against fasting. They have not known that the most prolonged fasting never produces such results. Fasting never produces blindness, deafness, idiocy, insanity, eye diseases, rickets, bowel disorders, etc., that follow in the wake of famine. So long as no food is consumed, the organism seems to be able to supply from its stored reserves the elements needed to sustain the vital organs and their functions, and to supply these elements in correct proportion. These evils are outgrowths not of complete abstinence from food, but of a very one-sided unsided or unbalanced diet. We meet with them in the absence of famine right here in America as a result of such diets. Purulent inflammation of the eyes and various skin eruptions are frequent outgrowths of carbohydrate excess. Sore eyes, simple or purulent, purulent, developed almost wholly in children who eat lots of sugar, syrup, white bread, etc., and who do not get fresh fruits and vegetables. Not even an inadequate diet of fruits and green vegetables ever produces such conditions. Jackson points out that the teeth are especially susceptible to rickets and scurvy, and that in both animals and man, there are slight changes in chemical composition, especially in chronic incomplete intonation. In the young, such intonation may delay the process of dentition, but persistent growth and development of the teeth as of the skeleton occurs in young rabbits held at a constant body weight by underfeeding. The effects of partial intonation have been studied in rickets and in scurvy. In both human and animal rickets, there is delayed and abnormal definition. Both enamel and dentine may be defective and imperfectly calcified. Without additional quotations about the effects of deficient diets, partial intonation upon the teeth in rickets and in scurvy, let us point out that dentists who have studied the effects of inadequate and deficient diets upon the teeth and do not know that fasting does not produce the same results as such diets are likely to conclude that fasting injures the teeth. Indeed, there is a tendency in all who study the effects of dietary inadequacies and deficiencies to run away from fasting, for they reason if a defective diet produces such undesirable results, no food at all should produce much worse results. They are blissfully unaware that fasting not only does not produce any of the so-called deficiency diseases, but that it is actually beneficial in every one of them. Dr. Jackson says that in scurvy, the gums are markedly congested and swollen in about 80% of adult human cases. The alveolar bone and periodontal membrane undergoes necrosis with consequent loosening of the teeth, and ulcerations of pyorrhea may occur. In pyorrhea, we see inflammation and ulceration of the gums, pus formation, loosening of the teeth, necrosis of the jaw, and even falling out of the teeth. In numerous cases of pyorrhea that we have cared for, the gum inflammation has subsided, the ulcers have healed, pus formation has ceased, and the loosened teeth have become firmly fixed in their sockets. And all of this has occurred while the patient was fasting. The effects of fasting must not be confused with the effects of a white flour, lard, pie, pasteurized milk, mashed potato diet. Not only do such conditions not develop during even a prolonged fast, but they are improved and made of their symptoms completely removed by a fast. This remarkable evidence of the value of fasting is explained by the fact that there is a disproportionate loss of the various constituent elements of the body during the fast and a redistribution of some of these, which results in a near approach to normal body chemistry. It is quite probable that it is much easier for the body to secure and utilize its mineral reserves during a fast than on a one-sided diet. Several years ago, Professor Forster of Munchen, who made experiments upon fasting animals and animals fed on mineral-free diets, and found that animals fed on mineral-free diets died quicker than animals not fed at all, explained that if no food is eaten, the body is nourished on itself, and consequently a supply of minerals is obtained from the broken down tissues. But if the body is nourished on foods freed of their organic salts, there is no demand made upon the tissues for albumin and carbohydrates, and so no minerals are derived from the broken down tissue. The body possesses a reserve from which in emergency it may for a time draw the required minerals, vitamins, and other elements, Animals fed on demineralized foods are compelled to expend their reserves in two directions. One, in the regular process of life, and two, in balancing up the mineral-poor foods they are consuming, while animals deprived of all food fasting are forced to expend their reserves only in carrying on the ordinary, though somewhat reduced, processes of life. The reserves of the fasting animal last much longer, and the body's chemical balance is also maintained. We know, of course, that the body fed on a denatural diet is capable of extracting minerals from its own tissues, but its mineral reserve is never great enough to meet the constant demand made upon it by mineral-free diet. The mineral-free diet exhausts these reserves very rapidly. During a fast, no such demand is made upon the body's mineral reserves. The body's vitamin and completin reserves supposed to be stored in the liver and a few other internal organs are also exhausted much more quickly on a deficient diet than on a fast. Do you guys understand about the food that we're eating? I mean, I don't know who knows, but this is for people with eyes to see and ears to hear, that's for sure. Experiments with deficient diets must be carried out over a sufficient long periods of time to exhaust the body's possibilities of self-help before the effects of the diet can be seen. Its own reserve must first be exhausted before the deficiency will begin to be manifest. However, when a nitrogen-free diet is given the body, it is forced to draw upon its own stores for material. We know that under the circumstances, the most important elements are vigorously retained by the body and an intensive nitrogen hunger is induced. The ability to utilize nitrogen is actually improved. During fasting, the same retention of the most important constituent of the body's stored material takes place even more efficiently than when on an inadequate diet. For while the fast compels the body to draw upon its reserves, the denatured or unbalanced diets draw excessively upon certain of these stores and compel their more rapid utilization. Indeed, the more of the elements supplied by the diet are given, the greater is the demand made upon the stored material not supplied by the diet. It is largely for this reason that death can be produced quicker by a diet of white flour or white sugar or meat soup, etc., than by starvation. During the fast, the body can regulate the expenditure of its stored materials in its own best interest and conserve there in such a manner as to make them hold out longer. On a denatural diet, the demand for stored material is such that this regulation is impossible. The stored reserves are soon exhausted by those elements contained in the diet and become as denatured or inadequate or unbalanced or deficient as the diet itself. This book was written originally in 1934, family. It's 91 years old. So this information has been out there for at least 91 years. There is more malnutrition due to overfeeding with an embargo on assimilation than to underfeeding. More often, there is a loss of power to assimilate special elements than an absence of them in the diet. Animal experimentation has shown that when animals are fed mineral-free diets, their nervous systems suffer most of all. Nervousness, weak and uncertain movements, and fits of madness develop as a result of such diets. On the other hand, the nervous system suffers least of all, almost none at all, in animals that are given no food of any kind, except water, until they die of starvation. This marked difference between the effects of fasting, even of starvation, and the effects of deficient diets may be seen in man if we contrast a case of beriberi, multiple neuritis, or of pellagra with a man who had fasted 40, 50, or 60 days. Nothing could be more clearly demonstrate the terrible drain upon the body's mineral reserves caused by the deficient diet than such a contrast. In beriberi, for example, paresis, especially in the lower extremities, paresis, diminished feeling, hyperparesia, excess feeling, tenderness of the nerve trunks, and loss of deep reflexes are the chief nervous systems present. In its advanced stage, pellagra also presents symptoms referable to widespread changes in the brain and cord. The fasting patient, after a most prolonged fast, not only does not present these or other nervous symptoms, but has lost all or nearly all of the nervous symptoms he may have had at the beginning of the fast. Almost all the effects of fasting, with the exception of the loss of weight and sometimes a temporary loss of strength, are exactly opposite to the effects of the deficient or denatured diet. Pashutin says that he has found in his experiment on dogs that when mineral salts are purposely withheld from the animal's food for long periods, other foods from which all mineral salts have been removed being given, the animal will use the mineral salts in the body over and over, none being excreted or passed in the urine, as occurs when the animal has a plentiful supply of mineral salts in its food. Family, are you seeing what I'm seeing? This is only partially true. Whether the animal is fasting or on a mineral-free diet, it seeks to retain its minerals as long as possible. There is, however, a day-by-day loss of more or less of these, so that in the case of the mineral-free diet, minerals must sooner or later be added to the diet or serious trouble results. The mineral exhaustion of the organism occurs much more rapidly, as previously shown, on a denatured diet than on a fast. Dr. Kellogg offers, among his many objections to fasting, this one: the body is also continually losing vitamins which are essential for the promotion of the processes of repair and the maintenance of various vital functions. The daily supply of vitamins is as necessary as the daily supply of air and water. Vitamins cannot be produced by the animal body. They are an exclusive producer of plant life. The liver hoards a small store of vitamins sufficient to serve in emergency, but the supply is not sufficient to last indefinitely, and as shown by the experience of sailors who contract scurvy and those who become the victims of beriberi through living upon polished rice. The vitamin store of the liver soon becomes exhausted and the body then falls into serious disorder. Fasting deprives the body of vitamins, and this involves the risk of serious injury for which no adequate compensation is offered. The total loss of all vitamins must certainly involve greater damage than the loss of one only. Yet the absence of but one of the three known vitamins for even a short period produces noticeable injury. Certainly the body can be in no way benefited by the deprivation of food iron, food lime, and other food salts, and of the precious vitamins, the activators of the vital processes. We have no means of knowing how much of a reserve store of vitamins the body possesses, nor do we know where all of these reserves are stored. Still less do we know about how much of these vitamins are lost to the body during a fast. All of this is as unknown to Kellogg and to the writer as to the reader, but we may be sure of one thing, namely, these stores are sufficient to outlast the fast. We know that Ricketts is positively benefited by fasting. Kellogg overlooks an important difference between fasting and a polished rice diet, namely that whereas in both the body is deprived of its daily supply of vitamins. Fasting makes little, if any, demand upon its vitamin reserves, while the polished rice diet rapidly consumes these. If he could show that fasting, even the most prolonged fasting, ever produces deficient diseases, then his objection would have some weight. As it is, the fact of experience must silence the voice of his theory. Vitamin-deficient diets compel the body to consume its vitamin stores, but we do not know that the body is forced to consume these stores in living off its own internal resources. We cannot say positively that these reserve stores do not contain the vitamins necessary to their utilization. We only know that pathological conditions attributed to vitaminosis do not develop as a result of prolonged fasting. Since there are no such injuries, they do not require adequate compensation. Fasting does not produce deep-seated and hidden injuries that make themselves felt at a later date. There is no harmful destruction of important or vital tissues from fasting. Weger says, even though vitamins are in a small degree consumed by fasting, we consider this factor quite negligible compared with the refinement of body chemistry and the overwhelming influences for general good that take place. After a fast, the tissues are more receptive and readily assimilate, as well as utilize vitamins that are necessary elements contained in vital or base-forming foods. Defense of rational fasting. Well, family, that's it for part 13 of Herbert M Shelton, The Science and Fine Art of Fasting. If you know anybody that has pyorrhea or in the bloodline, because you know that's supposed to be genetics, please tell them to listen to this. This is crazy. And this book was written in 1934. Do you know how Morton salt, it only has sodium and the iodine? It makes me wonder, when did they start taking all of the minerals out of the salt? And this was a good one, family. I'm not sure how many saw it, but I hope you guys watch it on the replay because it says a lot. And I really would like to know if this Dr. Kellogg, if his family owns that Kellogg's, never mind. Yeah, but I love you guys. And I'll be right back because I'm going to be reading out of the Hallelujah Scriptures, the Old Testament. It's just going to be a short one because young man's going to be going live, I think, in about 45 minutes. So just give me a couple of minutes, family, and I'll be right back. Shalom. I love you guys.